The sky was shattering. That's the only word that was appropriate. As the great dragon rose from Thunder Island, the red sky above began to break. Large cracks spread across space-time, letting through multicolored light, wild magic from the sea between worlds. The sky above was a cracked window, moments away from being torn apart, and when it did, the world was going to end. The cause of this shattering, a colossal dragon made of black stone, fused from the 8 great beasts, rose higher and higher. When it completed its ascent, when everything came crumbling down, its master would achieve divinity. Billions would perish, but of course, Emperor Gilderoy had never been bothered by civilian casualties. Across the continent of Beast Mecca, people watched. The elders, Muddy Wench, Old Man Kelton, Mother Silrag, and McGucket, they stared from the mountaintops, hoping their heroes could stop it before it was too late. Carmel of the Fae watched from their enchanted woods, amused by the chaos. Evelyn and Emily watched through the window at an abandoned factory, scared, but together again, thanks to the kindness of friends. Machna Orm watched from a rooftop, ready to swoop in and steal the time crystal once his new allies inevitably perished, ready to run away and erase this world for another chance at paradise. The only ones not watching were the soldiers on the battlefield. Outside Nessatine, 2 armies engaged in a final battle. The iron-willed soldiers of the Empire of Steel versus the remaining rebel armies. All that was left from Woodwillow, Pietra, Morias, and Braza. They fought not to win, but to buy time. Leading the charge was Caravander the Kingslayer. He'd waited his entire life for a battle like this. He fought off 10 men at once, his sword cutting through them like paper. An archer took aim at Caravander, but Prince Nerium cut him down. Caravander laughed. "Come on, your majesty! Give the order!" Caravander shouted. Trembling, Nerium raised his sword and ordered his men to charge. The Empire pulled out its big guns. A fleet of airships left their posts around Thunder Island and flew towards the battlefield, ready to drop firebombs on the rebel forces. A winged devil, Aros, flew through the ships, tearing them apart. Most of the airships exploded before they reached their destination, but the few that did make it were enough to kill hundreds. This battle, this final fight, is not what we are gathered here today to remember. This final chapter, the end of the campaign, began with something completely unnoticed by the Empire. An artificer, hidden by an invisibility spell, flew across the lake with a jetpack. His name was Hugo Wells. In his arms, he held a living treasure chest, a walking portal to the astral sea. 3 warriors sat inside the chest. Graven of House Epsilon, Pimmet Forbottle, and Vixen. Hugo flew high, higher than the dragon, and pulled a device out of Chester. The time crystal, pieced together again, modified to tear the greatest beast asunder. But before that, Hugo had another use for it. He flew down the dragon's throat, using the time crystal to momentarily disappear to another point in time, allowing him to pass through solid stone. He reappeared at the correct time period within the belly of the beast, a large room filled with spinning gears. Hugo sat Chester down and his friends climbed out. "Are we there yet? I want to blow this thing up." Gilderoy stood at the beast's controls, holding the sword of lightning and the shield of silver, wearing the crown of ice. He'd added a fancy new cape to his armor. Still, he looked like shit. There were deep bags under his eyes, and bits of his skin were flaking off as the energy within him burned away his flesh. Tubes connected to a large vat of purple liquid ran into Gilderoy's veins. "How's it going, gang?" Pimmet immediately threw a lightning bolt. It bounced off the wall of patented bulletproof DM monologue glass sitting in front of Gil. "I have a confession, something I've never told anyone else. I'm dying." "Good." As I fell through the astral sea, barely clinging to life, I found a cursed power, a holy light fitting for an emperor. It gave me strength, but, alas, there have been side effects. I can't survive outside the astral sea. The serum keeps my heart beating, but it isn't enough. Soon, I will die. That is my destiny. The thing is, I don't care much for destiny. I am strong enough to strangle destiny with my bare hands. Here's what's going to happen. In 1 minute, my dragon will break through the barrier between worlds, flooding this plane with the astral sea. When this happens, I will be fused together with the great beast, transformed into an immortal god king, strong enough to erase entire planes with the snap of my fingers. I will be king, not of my empire, but of every empire. I will conquer this world and every world. My faithful will be given strength, and the cowards who oppose me will be ground into dust. It's a shame you'll all die before my ascension is complete. The clock started ticking. 10 rounds till doomsday. Immediately, Gil flipped a switch, causing 5 robot soldiers to drop from the ceiling, each of them wielding a great beast key. The party was unfazed. Pimmet threw a lightning fireball. Vixen ran in and uppercut the robot holding the staff of Forrest, knocking its head off. He slammed the staff on the ground, creating vines that wrapped around the remaining robots. Hugo killed the flute robot with the Thunder Gauntlet punch, while Graven cut the Trident robot in half with his sword. The robot with the axe broke free and cast Flame Strike. Pimmet overpowered the fire with his Decanter of Endless Water, pushing the robot back into the gears, which ground it into dust. Pimmet teleported himself and Hugo to the other side of the bulletproof glass. Hugo cast Slow on Gil. Gil saved, but a chronal shift and tides of chaos were enough to make him fail. Hugo raised the shield and plugged the time crystal into the dragon's controls. Graven ran in and slashed through Gil's tubes. Instantly, Gil's flesh began to turn to dust. He could only unleash 1 attack per turn, but he made it count. Gilderoy stabbed the time crystal. Hugo held out the Flute of Wind and cast Pulse Wave, shoving Gil to Vixen, who punched him with a stunning strike. Graven slashed Gil across the chest, then, as a bonus action, kicked him in the dick. Gilderoy was furious. He was losing. He could feel his body wasting away into nothing. He was becoming weak, and that made him angry. He called upon all of the energy he could muster and unleashed all of it in a massive blast of light. Graven kept standing right until the hammer robot hit him in the knee. It raised its hammer for another blow, but Chester slammed into the robot as hard as it could, knocking it into the gears. Pimmet turned to the control panel, shrugged, and decided to cause some mischief. He cast Animate Creatures on every switch he could find. Outside, the ongoers watched as the dragon did a barrel roll. Inside, Gilderoy teleported up to Pimmet and plunged his sword into his chest, effortlessly breaking through Pimmet's shield spell. Then, the ground beneath Gilderoy turned vertical. Hugo grabbed Pimmet, Graven and Vixen grabbed the railing, but Gilderoy fell right into the gears. He screamed as they broke his bones and crushed his organs into paste. He dropped his shield and sword. His crown fell from his head. Gilderoy unleashed another burst of light, tearing apart the gears. He rose up and flew towards the control panel, cackling like a hyena. Vixen let go of the railing and fell towards Gil. Their fists collided with each other's faces. The flash of light filled the control room. When the flash subsided, Vixen was still standing. His helmet was broken, but he was standing. Gilderoy lay in front of him, half his body missing, the rest of him barely more than ash. "It's over." Hugo picked up the time crystal. He frowned. "We have a problem." "What?" "Orm and I modified the time crystal to destroy the great beasts. Ideally, we won't want to be in here when that happens, which is why I attached a timer set for 40 seconds, giving us enough time to flee. I started the timer right when I attached the time crystal to the controls." "And we don't have time to get out before it goes off?" "Oh no, we have plenty of time. That's the problem. When Gilderoy stabbed the time crystal, he broke the timer. Meaning, someone has to stay behind and detonate it manually." Gilderoy let out a deep belly laugh. "Oh, this is music to my ears. I've lost, but so have you. Fuck off!" "The way I see it, you only have a few options remaining. Option A, you blow up the dragon and die in the ensuing explosion. Option B, you run away, my soldiers take back the dragon, and then they complete my crusade. Option C, you try to hole up in here and hold them off, give yourself time to fix the timer, but you're all barely standing. They'll overwhelm you. Of course, there's another way. Shut up and die already. You can use the great beast. The ultimate weapon is sitting here for you to take." "I don't give a shit." "You should. You can hear it, can't you? Out there, people are dying. People you care about. Across the world, there is injustice. There is evil and poverty and war. But now, you have the ultimate solution. Kill the people you hate. Grind my empire into dust and build your own atop the ruins. Use the dragon, end the war, make sure no war ever begins again. That's your choice. That's what the Oracle gave you. A choice between death or cruelty. I'm dying, but my ideals live on. A world of strength, ruled by the mighty. A world free of weakness. I wish I could see it. I wish... Graven stomped on Gilderoy's head, crushing his skull. The party stared at the blood stain. We aren't using the Great Beast. We can't. Okay, I'm willing to die. I've had a good run. I'll stay behind and set off the bomb. There is one thing we can learn from our dear friend Gilderoy. How to make an exit. Pimmet laughed. Do you know what the difference between us and him is? We aren't dumb as shit. We have a chest! Chester ran up to the party and nodded. They got a feeling that it was saying, it's been a pleasure serving you. Hugo placed the time crystal on the control panel. He, Graven, and Vixen all climbed in Chester. Pimmet told them he would press the button, then immediately dive after them. He was lying. He pat Chester on the lid. You're not going down with the ship, bud. He hit the button and immediately grabbed Chester and dimension-doored out of the Great Beasts. On the battlefield, Empire soldiers watched with horror as the dragon glowed and disappeared. The cracks in the sky faded away. Their god king was dead. His dragon was gone. Terrified, the soldiers began to retreat. Carvander yelled to chase after them. No! Sylvester shouted, walking to the front of the battalion. In his hands, he held Nerium's young corpse. It's over. No more bloodshed. Carvander stared at him. I am glad that the final king of Woodwillow was not a coward. He was a warrior, and he earned a good death. There are no good deaths. And don't think your crimes have been forgotten. If you ever return to Woodwillow, you will hang. That's fine. There are plenty of countries out there in need of liberation. Meanwhile, Worm sat down and watched the sunrise. McGucket walked up to him. Thanks for doing the right thing for once, although you are still a right bellend. Whatever. My work is done. You know, that world you hated, it wasn't all bad. The Great Flood came when I was a child, but I survived. I grew up in the towers, surrounded by an endless ocean. I'd have been a real different person if the flood hadn't happened. I could have hypothetically grew up in the Empire, defected to Woodwillow, and killed the Great Dragon on the Day of Judgment. But that's all hypothetical. That world I left. Do you know what happened to it? Your enemies saved it. Made something real nice. Do you want to see? I would like that. Great! I just got one more thing I gotta do first. Meanwhile, coughing, Pimmet crawled out of the lake. Chester paddled up to the shore. Pimmet popped open the chest lid and looked inside. It was empty, just a wooden bottom instead of a portal. Well, shit! Right then, McGucket's truck pulled up. Howdy! I'm gonna go visit the Astral Sea. Hard to get there nowadays, with that explosion closing all of the rifts, but my truck can go anywhere. McGucket took Pimmet to the Astral Sea to pick up his friends. You know, you guys did a pretty good thing today. You remind me of some people I used to know. McGucket drove the party home. But time passes differently in the Astral Sea. By the time they returned, 6 months had passed. The war had dragged on for a few months after the Day of Judgment, but when they returned, it was over. The Empire was collapsing. Civil war was imminent, and it was likely Valvienta would regain independence. The Empire's occupying forces had been driven back. The storm Gilderoy had wrought was dying, revealing clear skies. The party was happy. They said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. This was the last time the four of them were ever together. They ended the campaign with a few one-on-one scenes to say goodbye to each character. In Woodwillow, near the village of Redigaru, a few former Empire soldiers had begun working as bandits. They attempted to rob some travelers when suddenly a hero burst out of the ground. He easily defeated them. The bandits ran away. Fear the Underminer! And don't come back! Turn your lives around! Vixen shouted. Meanwhile, in Audubon, Devillion and Emily laid a flower on their daughter's grave. Devillion knew that the Judgment cult was still out there. Evelyn was gone, and the cult was tearing itself apart without leadership, but its members were still devout. He wouldn't be fighting them. Someone else would have to finish the job. Meanwhile, in Morios, Graven was working at a soup kitchen. Borger Conward came up to him. I don't know if you heard, but Muddy Wench died yesterday. Peacefully, of old age. I heard. Your father's dead. Bigglesworth is in prison for treason. Cannonball was banished to hell. And I'm thinking about retiring. Morios is gonna need a leader, and the title of Duke is your inheritance. Hell, you could be more if you wanted to. The throne is your birthright. No! I don't want to be king. No one should. I'll help out where I can, try to rebuild the country, but not as a king. Just as another person trying to do his part. Meanwhile, Caravander stood atop the cliffs of Mitol, holding his blade, staring at the sea. His home was free, the empire he hated buried. But others would follow in its wake. Other tyrants would come for his people, and he would be ready for them. Meanwhile, Pimmet was upside down, held by the foot by a massive tentacle monster he'd ran into in the depths of the abyss after a wild magic surge gone wrong. Listen, all said is that it might do you some good to go on a diet. You don't have to kill me for that. He blasted his way free with a fireball. He ran for his life, and a treasure chest with legs ran after him. Meanwhile, in Pietra, a group of devils who come through the rift before it closed were ransacking a village. A fighter with black and white wings landed in front of them and cut them down. One devil walked out of the shadows. It was his father. Bullets tossed his son a small glass jar containing his soul and apologized for all he had done. Aros said nothing. He flew off to search for more devils to fight and more people to save. Meanwhile, in Nessatine, Dr. Hugo Wells picked up a picture frame containing his doctorate. He sat it down in a suitcase alongside his war medals and a photo of his friends. The great beast and the time crystal, the things he had studied, were gone. This was necessary. Still, he was curious. He didn't think he would find another great power source in this plane. But there were plenty of other planes out there. A gathered crowd in the courtyard watched as Hugo Wells climbed into a rocket. A portable hole and a bag of holding had been placed together in front of him. When shoved together by the rocket, they would hopefully send him to a new plane to explore. Hugo said his goodbyes, pulled the lever, and blasted off into the astral sea. And, well, that's the end of the story. Thank you so much for watching.